back to order. Further questions, members? Representative Heintzeman.
Put my glasses on. Mr. Chair, I have kind of a broad question and then a specific question for you. It's interesting hearing about the need and, kind of looking around the room and looking at, I'm going to focus on kind of the ag area. That we used to have a very resilient agriculture system where we had a lot of small farms. We had a lot of small towns. We had diversified farms. We weren't talking about 100,000 cows. We were talking about 10 cows or maybe 100 cows. And we had families on those farms. We didn't have a lot of employees. We had families working at those farms. They didn't have lobbyists coming to the Capitol. We didn't have things like permitting concerns. And I want to focus on the economy. The economy was much more resilient, much more diverse, much better to take a shock then. Now we have consolidation, very large corporations, monopolization, not much resilience, everything under one roof. And we have facilities producing more manure than small towns. If we were actually going to be fair, we would be requiring the same requirements as we do for a small town with the equivalent amount of waste for some of these facilities. So there's always the talk from the big about how they're being picked on. We set up systems, to fund and provide cost share and dollars to small farms. But whenever we provide assistance on a per acre basis or a per head basis or that, we subsidize the further consolidation and the bigness of the industry. So when we look at the issues of moving from a statewide 100 issues to one county, I'm concerned about the impacts because, maybe 50 years ago there was 100 people in the township, but now maybe there's 10. Maybe you have a county with 3,000 members, 3,000 people in a county versus 15,000 people in a county versus 250,000 people in a county. But the impacts, the social impacts when that could be there with intimidation within a county, if you have one large employer that is dominant, vertically integrated in the community, where no one locally can ever sign for fear of intimidation or a consequence to that. Or maybe even a joining county where they would feel a consequence for signing on the petition. Earlier, there was the presentation about, from one of the testifiers about we all live downstream or we all live upstream or we live, wherever air doesn't know a boundary. But I would comment that the economy doesn't know a boundary either, and the impacts of who's infected. There's an economic impact to the focus on consolidation for further and further getting bigger and bigger. That leads to more and more of the waste or more and more of the emissions and the consequences for those that are around them. So Chair Heintzeman, what about the impact, the peer pressure, the potential for intimidation within that local government? There's an old saying that people are for local control when they control the locals. That what's the impact if people don't have a voice locally and they because they live just over the line.
Thank you, Representative Heintzeman. So a couple of things. Number one, you suggested that it's one county. Of course, it's not. And if you look at the language, it's the county and the adjoining counties. So that's a pretty significant difference from the way that you were mentioning. And creating that opportunity for those people in the county where the project exists and in adjoining counties is how the bill is written. I'd also mentioned that, we can talk about, and we should, the impacts if this bill becomes law, but there does continue to seem to be some misunderstanding that it lowers standards, and it doesn't. Representative Hanson.
Mr. Chair, so we've, over the last 20 or 30 years, also focused on a watershed-based approach. And as the author, did you, in writing this, consider watershed or adjoining watershed versus county, adjoining county?
So, Representative Hanson, we went through this, and we're looking at trying to address the problems that we're hearing in the presentation earlier. And I'm well aware that the conversation could drift into well, water moves. And I think you could make the argument that that's certainly something to consider, but you could also make that argument from anywhere from Minnesota to the Gulf of America.
Mr. Chair, a follow-up?
Yes, Representative Hanson.
Yeah, the Gulf of America is a long ways away,
It certainly is, Representative Hanson.
Mr. Chair. When I read through this, I see a lot of report writing, with the agency tasked with doing a lot of reporting. It's, we talked a little bit about House File 1 back in 2011. I would hope that by 2025 that we could maybe just have an app that somebody could, maybe instead of the PCA writing 4 reports a year, they could set it up where you and lead fisher get a ding on your phone that, oh, there's another permit that has been adopted or finalized. But more importantly, rather than just writing reports to us, that we provide real time, as the PCA had mentioned, a real time that the public can see what their input has wrought, that the public can see in real time when a permit has been done, and that we can have the public can evaluate, because we're not in session all the time, and I hate for all those folks in the chair staff to keep looking through those reports that come back. It would seem that we could bring this up into 2025 and 2026 and beyond in terms of using technology to provide for the reporting to the public in terms of what's happening. And also the issue of, when do they expire? And what happens if there's a, permit that expires and doesn't get renewed, or they never submitted the renewal, that it's there and then it didn't get it. Because we just got, as was mentioned, that legislative audit report on Smith Foundry, and sometimes things don't happen, where we may not be happy with the PCA as well. So how do we provide that transparency in real time when most people are on these and not reading these reports?
So I think that's a great question, Representative Hanson, and I would just say, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about that if you would like to introduce a bill.
Well, and is this bill coming back, or, your intent is to pass this out tonight, is that? We could work on that.
The motion is to re-refer to the Labor and Workforce Development Committee. Representative Hanson.
And, Mr. Chair, would the jurisdiction, which sections would be in the labor, what they would be looking at? Would there be something where it could come to the Ag Committee for the somewhat ag sections? And we could keep working on it?
So the jurisdictional responsibility that they, in the Workforce Committee, wanted to address was the ombudsman.
Because of the deed, Mr. Chair, because of the deed, that would be a expenditure out of the deed budget.
That's correct, Representative Hanson. Anything further, Representative Hanson?
I would defer to my lead.
Lead Fisher.
I think I see some other hands from some of my other members first, if I'd like to give them their opportunity first.
Representative Purcell, anything further?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess, excuse me. So I have a couple of questions. I know you talked about other states and where they do permitting quite differently from here. And so particularly, like I was looking at Michigan's process. So I'm interested in like the research. Did you just talk with the Minnesota Chamber, or is this modeled after other or certain provisions of what's happening in other states? And then I have a follow-up.
So Representative Purcell, we were referring to several other states that have a number of the provisions that are in the language that's before us today. And the hope was that we could recognize that we're not asking for anything novel. This is something in a number of the provisions that many other states do. Like, for example, when we were talking about a staggered process where a permit could allow for construction and then later on, the next phase of their project. Now, if I was asking for a permit, that would be something that I'd have to consider very carefully. And I'm assuming that folks in those states where they have those kinds of opportunities to have a two-piece process, I'm sure they have to do that. There's always the possibility that they don't become operational. Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess looking at, they went about it quite differently in Michigan, it looks like. It costs $6.6 million. They upped their staffing, modernized systems. There's a lot of interagency coordination, which we heard a lot from the testifiers earlier today about how cumbersome that is, and the 6 different agencies that touch water. And then, of course, the public and tribal engagement and transparency. So I guess I was just wondering, like, if this just sort of came from that, like, chamber study, or if, like, there are pieces that have been successful in other states, too, that influence these, like, particular measures, things that you did take up from other states and things that you did not.
Thank you. There was a lot of conversations that happened with the chamber and then also stakeholders, folks from my community and others. Maybe if you had further questions for the chamber, we could bring them forward. Representative Purcell.
Thank you. So, like, in your process, you mainly just consulted the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce.
So my answer didn't change. I talked to a number of folks on this bill and will continue to talk to a lot of folks, including many of your members who I've committed to continue conversations with. Representative Purcell.
Great. And then, thank you, Mr. Chair. My follow-up, it seems like we haven't touched on, there's a pay option for an expedited process. I want to just bring up my concern that if this is truly for small and middle-sized operations, they maybe don't have the money that an Amazon or that, these big corporations who want to come into Minnesota, and they can just pay that money and get to the top of the line. And so I guess I just wanted to express my concern that that doesn't seem like that's congruent with the intent of the bill, and having some people be able to pay for expedited process that maybe not everyone is fiscally able to do that. If you can address that, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Representative Purcell, we talked about the process that would be what I characterized as a carrot as instead of a stick for the agency. I think it would help to provide that opportunity, and if MPCA was able to get through their process sooner than later, the bill allows for those extra dollars to remain in the agency. Representative Fisher.
I see a few other folks on my side that wanted to still ask more questions. I see Representative Jordan and Representative Faulkner.
Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned, so just in this discussion with Representative Purcell, you mentioned other stakeholders. Which other stakeholders were engaged in addition to the Minnesota Chamber?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, as I had mentioned earlier, like a lot of us here in the room, we've had folks from our districts that we communicate with. And there's some of those folks that I was mentioning earlier, and the chamber being one of them. Some of them, I'm probably going to leave off the record, but I'm happy to continue conversations, like I said earlier, with you and with other members that I have stated that I'd be more than happy to continue to talk about provisions in the bill. If you have suggestions, that's fine. We can work through those things. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I didn't hear any stakeholders listed apart from just people. So the Minnesota Chamber has been listed, but no other stakeholders have been named. Were Minnesota's 11 sovereign tribal nations consulted as stakeholders in this bill?
Thank you, Representative. So anybody that wants to have a say or has any interest in this bill, I welcome them, as I continue to say. And I am known to have been working on this for a long time, and I've reached out to a lot of folks. Did I have offers here today? Yes, and I'll take advantage of any opportunity to hear from anyone that would like to visit with me on this bill. Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I'm confused. Did you consult with any tribal nations in Minnesota in putting together this bill? And then I have another question after that.
It sounds like you're looking for a very specific answer,
Yeah.
and that's fine. What is your next question?
Mr. Chair, I didn't hear, I'm just asking yes or no for about tribal nations and that. And so like as part of that, I'm hoping if you did discuss this bill with Minnesota's tribal nations, I'm wondering how you can talk with this bill as it overlays with sovereign treaty rights that were retained by those tribal nations. For example, under the 1854 treaty, Minnesota's tribal nations that signed that have rights that they have retained about hunting, gathering, et cetera, on tribal lands. And I'm just wondering how this bill overlays with those treaty rights that, these sovereign tribal nations have as signatories to these treaties. So I'm wondering if you engaged with them, and if so, or if not, like what are the implications for these treaties that Minnesota has obligations under with this bill?
Yeah, Representative Jordan, I am happy to tell you that this bill is targeted and designed to help the folks in the medium to small level come to a ombudsman if the bill became law at deed and have a conversation about whatever their needs are. There is no one group that is targeted, as I have said earlier, that this legislation is specifically written for. And if anybody needs to come to get a permit, this legislation works for them. This is built out of the presentation that we heard earlier from stakeholders that you've mentioned you'd like a longer list. That's fine, and maybe we can talk offline about that. But what we're working towards is making sure that those folks that have been in these challenging situations trying to get a permit, and their permit is taking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of days longer than in other states, that they have a process that is working for them. Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's a no then, unless you're willing to say these are the stakeholders that have been engaged, and you're not willing to say we've engaged these even under direct questions, have you engaged these people? It seems pretty clear that no, this isn't, these people were not engaged, even though the state of Minnesota has legal obligations under these treaties that, people's rights were retained as a result of this. So I think it's really important that you know that how your bill is going to interact with these treaties as it pertains to Minnesota's law. And if we don't have all this information in front of us, it seems a little odd to me that we're trying to send it out. It's February. There's not really a rush here. And it's notable that we're willing to say one stakeholder into a microphone, but not list any other stakeholders by name on tape. So, I'm happy to talk with you offline, but I do think that, I'm not here as just an interested party. I'm here representing the voices of 42,000-ish Minnesotans, and this is their opportunity to hear from their government about what these things mean for them. So that's why I'm asking for this on the record. It's not just because I'm personally interested. I am interested on behalf of the people of Minnesota. Thank you.
Representative Falconer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if I can call up Mr. Clems for a question.
Mr. Clems, if you would come to the testifier's desk. And reintroduce yourself for the record, please.
Thank you, Chair Heintzeman. I'm Aaron Clems from the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy.
Representative Falconer.
All right, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Clems. The reason I asked Mr. Clems to rejoin us here is in the Chamber's report, it talked about three companies, Twin Metals, Huber, and Epitome, that left Minnesota. And so I'm just wondering if you could explain how that process unfolded, what the results were with their permitting process after they left the state.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Falconer and Chair Heintzeman. As far as I recall, there were three examples in the Chamber's report of permitting debacles that supposedly caused companies to leave the state. The first one was Epitome Energy's proposal to build a soybean crushing plant in Crookston originally, and then it was moved to Grand Forks, North Dakota, and was used as an example in the Chamber's report. Epitome then applied for an air permit in North Dakota, and they waited 361 days, almost a year, for a response after their application, which is longer than Minnesota's median time for issuing priority tier 2 permits, which is what this would be, and well beyond the 150-day deadline. And so if it was solely a matter of speed for issuing the permit, when they moved to North Dakota, nothing really changed. If anything, it was slower than the Minnesota process. The Huber Engineered Woods example was not really about permitting at all. This was an environmental review case that was conducted by the city of Cohasset. In that case, this legislature, without a single hearing, gave $60 million in subsidies to try to attract Huber Engineered Woods to Cohasset, and actually exempted them from one mandatory environmental review category. When Huber Engineered Woods lost in the Court of Appeals and an EIS was ordered, Huber moved to Alabama. And so they got tens of millions of dollars of subsidies and a major carve-out in environmental law, and when they were asked to do an environmental impact statement, they left. The last example that's cited by the Chamber report that I'm going to talk about is Talon Metals. So Talon has proposed a mine near Tamarack, Minnesota, a nickel mine, but it's also proposed to build a processing plant in North Dakota. And Chamber has described this as jobs leaving the state. First of all, I don't know what's going to be the status of the $114 million in federal Inflation Reduction Act funds that has been used to subsidize the North Dakota plant. And Talon, in December, revised and resubmitted their entire application for environmental review. And this is one of the reasons why environmental review goes slowly for major and complex projects, is you have proposers making big changes to their project and then coming back and asking for the environmental review agency, in this case the DNR, to start basically from scratch. So I think in all the cases that have been in front of you, there's always a story. I mean, it's not just one single explanation for why some of these projects are difficult to permit or difficult to get through environmental review, and they're almost always the ones that are the most complex. So I think the three examples that the Chamber has presented of major projects that left the state over permitting and environmental review all have their own story. And they're really more stories about the complexity and difficulty of finding how to meet Minnesota's environmental standards, which, as everyone says in this committee to me today, are not being lowered by this bill. So I hope that answers your question, Representative Falconer.
Mr. Clems. Anything further, Mr. Clems? Representative Falconer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Clems. I guess I just wanted to bring this up because, as Representative Finke said before she had to leave, it does seem like if the intent, like you said, was small, medium-sized businesses, that a lot of these larger businesses are kind of being swept up within this permitting framework. And it seems to be more appropriate that, given the different nuances of different types of industry, the different types of projects, of different scopes of projects, different sizes, where they are located, that one blanket bill covering every industry in the state to so-called reform the permitting doesn't really, the one-size-all approach is not fitting in this scenario. So just want to make that comment, and I'll finish. Thank you.
Lead Fisher.
Thank you, Chair Heintzeman. I want to say also thank you for the opportunity that we're able to get back this evening to continue talking about the bill tonight. That's important. You know, as I've taken a look at this over time, the big thing that's causing a lot of angst for me, and in some ways I thought some were addressed by hearing some of the testimony today, some of it raised up. I take a look at the importances that we're helping not only the small, medium businesses that are struggling out there, but it's also important as we're protecting our communities. And I'm coming from the aspect of, we've had a number of instances where I've had businesses that were permitted by the MPCA that got their permits, and they violated and also didn't give the right information. And so as a result, I'm skeptical. I'm struggling with that part of it. This is why we're pushing back here. You know, when I take a look at what happened with Northern Iron in St. Paul, what's happening with Northern Metals in Minneapolis, what happened with Water Gremlin. You know, they had all gone through the permitting process and we still had problems with it. And so I'm concerned that it makes it easier sometimes for the bad actors to be able to be out there. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do is how do we do this in a proper way? And so I'm coming from that kind of angst. One of the things that it kind of helps me a little bit is some of the people who were supporters of the bill had met with me and had said, oh, there's no way that this is going to help speed along mining. But yet today when I heard testimony today, it felt like it could help speed mining along on large projects. And so I'm hearing conflicting messages. And so that causes confusion and raises more concerns for me. You know, and so I'm just laying out here what I'm seeing and why we need to have more work done on this bill. I appreciate your saying that you're open to that. One of the areas that is very concerning to me is that large parts of our state are covered by our treaties out here. And the fact that when we're taking a look at public input, nowhere in the public input do we allow the tribes to have input as a consistent part in every permit coming through because their treaties cover the entire state of Minnesota. But yet you've got to live within 100, 100 people within that county or adjoining county. Well, a lot of the tribes that have rights may not have people that live in that county. I think it's really important that these are the things that are incorporated in, and finding out from the tribes, what are they thinking of? What are their concerns? They might have permitting concerns. They want to be out there. I think we need to have some very active outreach in there. I think we need to find a way, as I keep on hearing say, this is about the small, medium businesses. But at the same time, it feels like it'd be very open-ended. It's important that we find ways to make sure that if this is more about the small, medium businesses, that we somehow figure out to get it more tailored in, to narrow it in those areas. And I think one of the things that I take a look at, and this goes to the question that I had when the chamber was up here, I feel that the bill might be missing part of the problem out there is we really haven't identified what the root causes are out there. Because one of the things that I'm imagining the fiscal note is going to be is adding more staff. Is it the right staff? Is it, how much money is it going to be? There are questions out there that we have as we think about it. We don't have that fiscal note in it. And I think it's very important. This is why I'm going to press again. We need to know that before we can have that bill, before we can feel confident to pass this bill on. I do know it's got another committee stop. Can you commit and say that this bill will come back to us after going to labor?
So the motion today is that it'll go to labor. And I've been asked the question several times, and I continue to point out that it's going to labor. That'll be the opportunity to continue to work on this bill. And I invite anyone that has interest in how this bill has been written to meet with me, to work towards resolving concerns wherever we can. And I appreciate the conversation. I really do. Thank you. Fisher.
Thank you, Chair Heintzeman. I hear what you're saying. We're the Committee of Fiscal Responsibility. I feel it is important that it comes back here. That we should be able to do some more work in public out here because there have been some serious concerns raised that now gives us an idea where we should be having the amendments, some amendments to address it. Because I can't get a guarantee, I move to lay the bill on the table. Roll call.
Okay, all those in favor of laying,
Roll call.
Mr. Chair, a roll call was requested.
roll call being requested, chair votes no.
Vice Chair Burkle,
No.
Lead Fisher,
Yes.
Rev Falconer,
Yes.
Rev Finke, Rep Gilman,
No.
Rep Hansen,
Yes.
Rep Jacobs,
No.
Rep Jordan,
Aye.
Rep Nelson,
No.
Rep. Purcell,
Purcell, aye.
Rep. Schultz,
No.
Rep. Warwas,
No.
Five yeses and 7 noes. The motion does not carry. Any further discussion, members? All right. Seeing no.
Roll call for the final bill.
Thank you, Lead Fisher. Roll call being requested. I renew my motion that House File 8 as amended be recommended to be re-referred to the Labor and Workforce Development Committee. All those, excuse me. Clerk will take the roll.
Chair Heintzeman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burkle,
Yes.
Lead Fisher,
No.
Representative Falconer,
No.
Representative Finke, Representative Gilman,
Aye.
Representative Hanson,
No.
Representative Jacob,
Yes.
Representative Jordan,
No.
Representative Nelson,
Aye.
Representative Purcell,
Purcell, nay.
Representative Schultz,
Aye.
Representative Warwas.
Aye.
Seven yeses, 5 noes. The bill is on to the Workforce Development Committee. Members, that concludes today's agenda. With no other business before the committee, we are adjourned.